Life in all its myriad forms cover the jewel of the solar system, Earth. The planet we call home boasts an amazing array of flora and fauna, with the dominant species, us, perched atop the global food chain. But is that perch as secure as we believe it to be? And as we look down, do we truly see all that exists in the shadow of the pedestal of our own creation? Or does hubris blind us to that which we cannot easily see? There are those who say winged creatures glide through moonlit skies or glare from the darkness with crimson eyes. Are the plaster cast footprints filling display cases in museums around the globe proof of the existence of the creature indigenous people of North America named Sasquatch in bygone days? Or are they all part of an elaborate hoax perpetrated against an all too often gullible society? And are we justified in embracing the evidence of eyewitness accounts and other evidence, or equally justified in denying that any new thing could be discovered under the burning light of day or the cool rays of a full moon? Are cryptids such as Mothman and Bigfoot actual living creatures, or do they only haunt the fertile forests and fields that border the pathways leading through the shadows of legend?
Hello, this is Charles Romans, the host of Shadows of Legend. Today we're speaking with Billy Decker from Santa Fe, Texas. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, Charlie. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good so far. And when was your first experience with what most people consider to be strange or paranormal?
Well, my first experience with Sasquatch was, I believe, was in 1974 when I was working construction down in Davie, Florida.
All right.
And I was after I got out of the service, I was working construction up in Delray. This is in South Florida, in Boca Raton, Delray. And there was a lot of new construction going on. We're building condos everywhere down there. And I was working with a crew we followed the roofers, and we did the fascia board and the subfascia. There was a two-man crew, and when they brought me on, I mean, we were really sort of knocking them down. It wasn't me. We just worked good together. And we got ahead of the roofers. So Roger was from Davie, Florida, and he goes, "I've got a house down there. We can do some punch out. We can hang the windows and the exterior doors." And I said, "Yeah, okay, that's fine." And I was, well, how old was I? 1974, 20? Yeah, okay. And it was just late 74. So, like in December. So I drive. I'm in my VW, and I'm headed out towards the turnpike.
Yeah.
On Glaze Road, and I don't know if I was on the turnpike or on Glaze Road when I heard that a skunk ape, and that's what they call Sasquatch in Florida, had tore the stomach out of a horse and ripped the head off of a calf. And I'm what?
That's
what?
Pretty extreme.
I'm thinking to myself, okay, So when I got to Roger's house, and Roger lived near the college down there, well, everything's probably changed by now. But I go, "Hey, you know what I heard on the radio?" And he goes, "Skunk ape." I went, "Yeah." He goes, "Everybody's phones are ringing off the walls in the town." I went, "Okay." I said, "Well, where's the house we're going?" He goes, "About a half a mile from that ranch." I went, "Okay." And it just kind of went in one ear, not the other, because I had read that story with Ron Moorhead in some magazine about his Sierra Deer camp, and I knew that what they called Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And a friend of mine who was standing next to me they call them skunk apes down here. I said, okay, So I knew what was they said on the radio.
Right.
So they were building houses in the orange groves. And I mean, they had maybe a half a dozen oranges trees in a front yard, side yard, backyard. And I mean, it was like on the edge of the orange grove. And they used to grow a lot of oranges down there. So there was no job site. There was no roach coach going to pull up at break time and dinner time to buy something off of. So we're all in Roger's truck. And I said, "Hey, man, are we going to go into town?" He goes, no. And they brown bagged it. Him and Jimmy, they both had sandwiches. I said, "Oh, okay." So I went out back and I picked some oranges. And I got out of sight of the house. I probably walked in that grove maybe 150, 200 feet. And I was picking them big, sticky oranges. And all of a sudden, I got this terrifying feeling like something is right next to me, watching me, or whatever, So I had 3 or 4 in my hand. I just walked back to the house because when I turned around, all I saw was trees because they kind of grow them. They stagger the trees, to make available all the whole orchard. And when I got back to the house, I go, "Hey, something's out there." And they said, "Yeah, nothing's out there but orange trees." And I went, "No, I mean, something else is out there, And they go, "Billy, there's nothing out there." I went, "Okay." But anyway, that was the first time I got that terrifying feeling that like, I got to get out of here right now, you know? And that was the first time.
Well,
And
now
that was
during
like,
that, I'm sorry
that
to
was like
interrupt.
December 1974.
Yeah. Well, now, did you
Okay.
happen to notice whether there was any effect on your surroundings when you got this feeling? Because a lot of times when people recount the presence of Bigfoot, they also recount that all insects and birds, everything stops. It goes completely quiet. Did you notice anything like that?
No, no, I was in the groves, you know. I mean, I don't remember there being any critters on the ground or, you know, insects or anything like that, you know. I might have heard a plane going over, you know, headed to Lauderdale Airport or something like that, but that'd have been
Yeah.
about it, you know. And I don't
Okay.
even recall that, you know. So that was in 74, like December, because I thought it was in 75, but a friend of mine's daughter was born January 1st, 1975, so it had to happen before that.
Okay.
And so the next time, it was probably late 77, 70, early 78. It was in the wintertime.
Okay.
And I was visiting a friend of mine in Delray, which is north of Boca. And I left their house kind of late. I was on my motorcycle. I had a 441 Victor back in those days. And
Awesome.
I left kind of late. And I was headed west on Atlantic Boulevard. And it was wintertime and the moon was full. And I was headed west and the moon was in the western sky. And I go, man, this is nice. I stopped my bike, pulled my helmet off, you know, and kind of looked around. All I saw was agriculture on both sides. You know, you could see for a couple hundred yards in any direction. And all of a sudden, I got that feeling, that terrifying feeling again, you know. And man, I couldn't start my bike quick enough. And my little 441 wasn't that fast. You know, it made a lot of noise, but it wasn't that fast. And I cranked it up and got out of there. So that was the second time in Florida. And so now I moved to Texas here in 1978, in September 78.
All right.
And I started working in the chemical plants and refineries, you know. And matter of fact, I made more money as a helper out here in Texas than I did as a journeyman back east. You know, that's how the pay scale was different. Ain't that fun?
Yeah, I was going to tell you,
so,
I used to work construction too. I worked back in the mid 80s down in Florida. And Florida's the right to work state, so they don't pay a whole lot.
Yeah.
And people would go down south and work long enough to get their union card and then go back up north where they make more money. So, yeah, I understand.
Yeah, when I started metal framing before I moved out here, I was the superintendent got me a job as a metal framer because he knew I could do construction. I was the only non-union hand on the job, you know, and I played the check pool with him every week and stuff. And Dave Mathewson told me, Billy, if you join the union, I'm going to fire you. So I told the steward that. He just laughed. He goes, I'm not here to try to talk you into it, you know. He goes, you want to play check pool? I go, yeah, I'll play check pool with you guys, you know. But anyway, I moved out here in 78, started working for Brown and Root. And I was working new construction, and I started working like a maintenance job. And then I was out of work for a while. That's how it is out here. And so I met this guy, his name Wayne Yates, and he wound up being one of my best friends, you know. And when he passed away, man, that hurt me bad. But when we met, Wayne had 75 acres up there in Calvert, Texas, which is on the other side of College Station. And I'd already been up there with a mutual friend. We did some rabbit hunting up there, and that was before Wayne moved up there. And when I met Wayne, he goes, "Oh yeah, you've been up there." He goes, "Come by, get the key to the gate." He goes, "You can go up there hunting anytime you want." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." And we just met, you know.
Yeah.
We're doing air conditioning work, and I met him in the attic, you know. And so I said, "Okay." So about a week later, like it was middle of July, you know, I went by, got the gate. He already took his horses up there. I said, "You mind if I ride him?" He goes, "No, not at all." I said, "Okay, I'll take some feed with me." So I took two friends of mine, and we're going to go up there do a little hog hunting. And so we kind of scouted the area. 75 acres. That's pretty nice, you know. A lot of trees, you know, and a few fields. And I said, "Well, I'm going to sleep in this tree tonight." And they go, "Man, we're not sleeping in the woods tonight." My two friends go, "No, we're going to stay at the camp." I go, "Whatever," you know. Yeah. So I got my rope, pulled myself up in a tree. I was probably 15 feet in the air on a big limb. I would kind of straddle a big limb like I was riding a horse, you know.
Yeah.
And I tied myself to the tree, and I made some stirrups for my feet so my feet wouldn't fall asleep. I'm 26 years old, and this is 1980.
Yeah.
And so it's, like I said, it's middle of July. It was a full moon, and I was kind of, you know, just looking around, you know, and kind of just relaxing, leaning against the rope, you know, because I had to lean against something, you know.
Oh,
man, I don't know what time of night it was, but I got that feeling that just terrorized me again. And I was scared, and I just kind of looked around. Everything. I'm in the woods now, up in a tree, and I look down and I'm looking around that limb, and I see a pair of hands reaching for my feet, and I kind of went, "What?" And it took off. I didn't have to go. It probably took 2 steps, and I couldn't see it anymore because it was dark under these trees. But I saw these pair of hands reaching for my feet, and it scared me. And I didn't climb down there. I stayed in the tree all night. I didn't go to sleep. That's for sure.
Well, I would say
So
not.
I got back to the camp. Well, we call it the camp. That's where Wayne wound up building the house. And I told them guys, I said, "Hey man, I was out there. Something was reaching for my feet, And they looked at each other like, okay, whatever, Now, when Wayne passed away, this is funny. He had 3 kids, and they used to call me Uncle Billy.
Yeah.
And when Wayne passed away, I had the 2 oldest sons. They're both, one's 49, one, and Wayne, I don't know how old Aaron is. He's like in his 50s.
Yes.
And I said, "Why did you guys move away from there?" And he goes, "Oh, something happened with mom and blah, blah, blah." I said, "Okay." I said, "Let me tell you what happened back in 1980. And I told him this story. And Aaron goes, "Bigfoot?" And I went, "Yeah." I said, "He was trying to grab my feet." And they both brothers looked at each other, But anyway, so that was that time. So here we are, we're in 1990, and I'm up at the northern part of Lake Sam Rayburn, where there's a bridge going across, and it goes into Broadus, this little town. Back in those days, we just had a blinking light. It's a small town. And these friends of mine had a lake house that was kind of like on the north side of that road. That road kind of goes northeast. And you turn down, there's lake houses all on the lake. So it was like December, and it was cold. And I had my insulated coveralls on. I told Justin, I said, I'm gonna go across the road there, see if I can kill a pig. But I mean, I was armed. I had my 30 caliber carbine, my 9mm carbine, and my PT-92 Taurus with me. I was going to kill a pig. And
Sounds like you were prepared.
Huh?
Sounds like you were prepared.
Yeah, I was. I didn't want to find a herd of them. I mean, I didn't want to. I have to turn around and run in those insulated coveralls. Wouldn't make it very far. So I stayed in the woods. I walked across the street or across the road, and I walked down to this little creek that's called Indian Creek, and it might have been like a half a mile from the road, and kind of like walking in a southeast direction, okay. And towards the lake, and but it was getting late. It started getting dark. So I better get out of here while I can still see, or get turned around in here. But I started heading back towards the road, and man, I got that feeling again. Something is watching me. Something is walking me out of the woods. And yes. I didn't dare turn around. I just kept walking. I walked across the road. I went down. I told Justin, I said, "Man, something's out there in the woods." He goes, "Man, was it a panther or something?" I said, "Man, I don't know." But so now I've been corresponding with some guys that they hunt Sasquatch in East Texas, up around the Lufkin area. This is in the Lufkin area. Okay. And this one guy, Kenneth, said to the north of where I was, there's a place where they've seen a lot of sign, and they're looking for caves. And to the south of where I was, just recently, on this end of this peninsula, there's a marina down there. There was a gangly-looking Sasquatch that was digging through a dumpster. That was real recent. So and this guy Kenneth, he's always up there in those woods. And he's 3 years older than I am. And this fall, I plan on going up there with him.
In that area, are they doing a lot of construction or something like that? Talk about the gangly Bigfoot eating out of the dumpster. Yeah, I was wondering if it was forced out of its habitat.
That's all this Angelina National Forest.
Oh, I see.
The Sabine Forest, the Barrister Wilderness. That's all going to stay just like it is. And you can't buy any houses on Sam Rayburn, any of these man-made lakes in Texas. You can't. They won't allow you to lakeside properties. It's our Army Corps of Engineer thing.
I see.
And so now in 97, okay, let me back up a little bit now. My wife homeschooled my 2 daughters, okay, for 8 years, and they went straight to high school. They wanted to play sports. So while she was homeschooling, we all trained with the Korean martial arts. We all got our black belts together. It was their physical activity,
Well, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it was pretty neat. It was pretty neat, doing a family thing like that.
Well, yeah.
So I got involved with some other schools that used to have martial arts camps up around Cold Spring, Texas. This is on Lake Livingston, and if you go up to like Cleveland and you get on 2025 and go kind of northwest, you come into Cold Spring, and a lot of Bigfoot sightings right on the Lone Star Trail. Lone Star Trail goes right through Double Lake Park. So we used to have camps in the Wolf Creek Park and in Double Lake. Double Lake is where it happened. So I used to always like, even though I was a black belt, I used to like to compete on the color belt teams because it was more fun. I didn't want to be a director. I just wanted to go up there and have fun. So finally we had a survival camp out, and things got turned around. They go, "Come on, Mr. Decker, you're not going to be in the field anymore. You're coming with us." And I went, "Oh, okay, yeah, whatever." So my first camp on the black belt team, I said, "Well, I'm going to make this as realistic as I can." And earlier that year, there was a place out in the woods that I spent the night, and it was a designated spot, my camp, Mr. Decker's camp. So what I did is it was a Halloween weekend, 1997, and I decided, well, I'm going to make this as realistic as I can. And we had these things called day trails and night trails. And what it is, you have like a red team and a blue team.
Okay.
So you put them out in the woods about 100 feet apart. Somebody walks through, guy jumps out. You do a little technique and you giggle about it, and then you go walk down to the next guy, and he jumps out and you do a little technique. It's called day trails. Well, this one was night trails, and we started at about 11 o'clock at night. So it's dark. And I don't even remember if there was a moon or not, because I don't remember. But 97, Halloween weekend. But anyway, so I said, well, I'm going to make this as realistic as I can. So I took all my predator calls with me. I'm sitting out there about 50 feet from my campsite, and I'm blowing in my hog caller, my hawk, my wounded rabbit, my fawn bleat, my crow, everything I had.
Yeah.
And it's about 11:30 at night, and all of a sudden, and I got on my radio and I said, "Hey, I'm not by myself anymore out here." They heard me stop because they heard me making all this noise. Then they heard me stop and say this on the radio. And my friend Mac, he's in Mississippi. I got to call him about once every 2 months and say, "Mac, did this really happen?" He goes, "Yes, I heard you say that on the radio." I go, "Okay, thank you." And so they said, "Okay, Mr. Decker, shut down all nighttime activity." So I walked back out and Biggie's right behind me. But I didn't turn around and look at him. I just don't want to look at him. I got up and I walked out to the trail, and I told the color belt, I said, "Stay here." I went down the end of the trail. I got Ruben. And Ruben's a black belt. And he goes, "Hey, man, what's going on? I heard on the radio." I said, "Man, come on. Let's get out of here. Something is out here with us in the woods." So we all walked back up this one trail towards the bridge. And if you look on the map, you can see the Double Lake Park. There's like the lake is on the west side of the bridge, and there's a trail that goes straight down. And if you follow the end of it, if you go to the end of the lake, there's a trail that goes off to the east, and that's the Lone Star Trail. Well, I was on this other trail that went straight up. So there's about 20 of us standing on this bridge, and Ray Williams and Stu Fabian and Mac Manley, his son, decide they're going to go back into the woods. This is like midnight now. And they instead of going straight to where I was, they took that left and they went down into the Lone Star Trail. And we watched them until they went out of sight. Must have been a full moon. Yeah. So we watched them until they went out of sight. And all of a sudden we heard this stomping and tree limbs snapping like you ain't never heard. Loud, maybe less than 100 feet away from us. And everybody's going, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." And I mean, Mac was standing right next to me, so he remembers it. And everybody's going, "Wow, what was that? What was that?" And I go, "What did it sound like?" And they go, "An elephant, a rhinoceros." I said, "Okay. How many feet did you hear?" Everybody agreed, 2 feet. I said, "Well, that was probably Sasquatch." And they go, "You mean Bigfoot?" And I went, yeah, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call him, So I have to call Mac every couple of months. And I said, "Mac, do you remember this? I need a reality check, because why just keep happening to me, And I have a friend of mine that I even talked to today. His name's Brandon. He lives up in the Dallas area, and he saw a Sasquatch on the Sabine River in Hawkins about 20 years ago, and he saw its face. And he said the reason I posted this on Facebook about it, run through the woods snapping, and that's how we got in touch with each other, because the same thing happened to him, but it was in the daytime. And he said Biggie come out of the woods on a 3-point stance and looked right at him 30 feet away. He said they dropped their guns and turned around and ran. And he goes, "Billy, it had a man's face." I go, I believe you. So that's Texas. So now my wife is from Arkansas. Her family was involved in agriculture, and they farmed a lot, all in that area around Wynn, Arkansas, on Crowley Ridge. It's like a small mountain range that was formed during the earthquake of 1811. The center of the earthquake was in New Madrid, Missouri. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but well, you're closer to it than I am. You probably have, you know. But
Oh, yes, I've heard of it.
you know what I'm talking about? New Madrid. It's
Yes.
in Missouri.
Yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, a lot of people believe that that's how the Crowley Ridge was formed. So for the past 30 years, man, I get this. I get that same feel. I won't go out at night. And when my father-in-law was alive, I used to go down into the bottoms with his 1-ton truck and do predator calling and call them and try to call coyotes. And they'd come in, but they wouldn't get close, you know. But for the past 30 years, I just will not go out there at night, you know, because there's something there, you know. So last June 23, I always feel it. So
Yes.
last June, I asked one of my nephews, Douglas, that was living out there with his mother when my mother-in-law was in Virginia, and he won't go out there at night either. I said, Douglas, when you lived out here, did you see anything? And he looked at me and stared at me for a couple of seconds, and he said, Michael has seen the creature. I go, I need to talk to Michael. So I didn't, and Michael was my fishing buddy.
Yeah.
And but now he works for the railroad. He's kind of hard to nail down. So I did get to talk to him a year ago, August, a year ago this time. So Michael goes, yeah, I'll take you right to the spot. So we walked, and it's on my mother-in-law's place. So we walked down by the gate, and we walked all the way down into the bottoms, and he goes, right here. You know, he cleared a branch out of the way. He goes, right here. He goes, I was following this deer down here. He was 16 years old. He's like 36 now. He said, I was following this deer. And all of a sudden, these 3 creatures stepped out from behind this tree. He said a male about 8 feet tall, a female a little over 6 feet tall, and a young male that was almost as tall as the female. And I said, what'd you do? He goes, I turned around. This is in the daytime. He said, I turned around and ran back up the hill. And he says, Uncle Billy, they had red eyes. So he saw their red eyes in the daytime. So I posted this on Ozark Bigfoot, and on the Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel. And I got a response from this guy who's going to meet me out. We're going out there next week. My mother-in-law is going to be 91, and one of the guys from the cartel is going to meet me out there. We're going to go look at this park that my mother-in-law lives across. And he saw some tree bends on this park, and I said, really? I said, last year my grandkids were out there hiking all through those trails, you know. So anyway, this guy Robert's going to meet me out there. We talked on the phone today, and just north of Wynn, on the eastern side of Crowley Ridge, there's a little unincorporated area called Levesque, and another guy posted on there that he lived in that area, and in 2021 that he'd seen a Sasquatch on his property there in the Levesque area. And my nephew lives in my mother-in-law's old house that's about 2 miles north, not even 2 miles, about a mile north of there, where the cemetery is. And so they're all over Crowley Ridge. And these people, this group in East Texas that likes to look around for Sasquatch, there's a lot of chicken plants, like from Lufkin all the way to Texarkana.
Right, and that would be an attractant, definitely.
Exactly. And there's this one area that Kenneth likes to go to, and they see Sasquatch prints everywhere. And now in Arkansas, there's only a few miles from where my mother-in-law lives, there's a chicken plant in Colt. And when we go into Colt, we take a right, we go up on Crowley Ridge. But if you go take a left at that light, there's a chicken plant down there. And I want to go talk to those people and just say, hey, what happens to your chickens every night? Do the critters come get them? And I want you to look around for footprints.
You mentioned a couple miles in this direction, a few miles in that direction. To a human, we might be thinking, oh my God, it's a mile away. I'm not going to walk a mile. But to a creature that lives in the outdoors, 10 miles isn't much. It's just part of the range. It's just what they do. So it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility for one creature on all those areas you mentioned, one creature be frequenting all of those.
Yeah, think about the stride that they take too. If they're 8 or 9 feet tall, man, our stride is what, maybe a couple of feet. Theirs is probably like 5 feet. You know what I mean? And as fast as Biggie went running, busting through those trees, man, it was fast. I mean, it lasted about 5 or 6 seconds, and he was gone.
What do you think about the musculature of a horse, for instance, and how fast horses are? You get something who has a comparable musculature. There's no way to estimate just how fast a Sasquatch could move.
Right. Especially through the trees. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Breaking everything in his way. You know? Yeah. It's pretty neat. I don't know how to categorize them. I want to think, because you hear about hybrids every now and then.
Yes.
There's a legend. I can remember when Tammy and I first got married that there's an older Mexican couple that kind of adopted us. They took us under their wing, and
Okay.
Pat was from Old Mexico, and Jimmy was from Galveston. And as a matter of fact, I don't live too far from Galveston. But in case a lot of people don't know, Galveston is an island. A lot of people don't know that. But anyway, that's just that point. Anyway, I was talking to Pat, and this was over 40 years ago, and I started talking about Sasquatch, and she told me that there was a legend, or not. I don't want to say a legend. She said she heard when she was growing up that there was a man they called Juan de Oso. Oso means bear,
Okay.
and of course Juan means John. And he was born in a cave, and his mother was kidnapped by a bear. Okay, and he grew up just like everybody else. He had big feet, and he never wore shoes. But this is around Monclova, Mexico. And okay, Pat's been gone for a while. This is probably early 1900s.
Yes.
So she heard about it when she was a little girl, about Juan de Oso. Now they have, I did a Google search on it, man. All I found was some storybook of Juan the bear. Somebody made a fictional story about a bear. You know what I mean? I went, oh man, that's not the Juan de Oso I'm looking for.
Well,
But anyway,
those things become more difficult to research as time goes on, because search engines, for instance, always pop up the most popular ones first.
right.
But there's a lot of the older things that are harder to find. But you're talking about the hybrids. There's an American Indian legend about Bigfoot mating with humans. And there's, in Russia, I interviewed a gentleman, and we weren't talking about any breeding habits, but he said that Sasquatch in Russia are much more friendly. They'll come out and interact with people out in the wilder parts of that area.
Yeah,
So it's
a
possible.
friend of mine, Brandon, a friend of mine told me today.
What's that?
We talked on the phone. We talked earlier. He's going to Oklahoma this weekend, and because they have spotted a hybrid female, and
Okay.
she is not afraid to come around people like you and me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As from a distance, she's just like a big girl with hair on her, a lot
Yeah.
of hair. But she is not. It's kind of like coy dogs. Like half coyote, half whatever
Yes.
kind of dog. They're
Yeah.
not afraid. They're not afraid of men
No.
or like humans, like coyotes are. In fact, I walked up on a pack of coy dogs one time, and I thought they were gonna chew me up. I had my pump shotgun, because they're not afraid of you. They run in packs too. They'll the thing about coy dogs is their breeding cycle is different than like coyotes, because coyotes have their pups in the spring.
Yeah.
And grow up, but the domestic dog have them all year round. So coy dogs really, they don't last long out there. But anyway, Brandon's going up to Oklahoma because they spotted a female. I forget exactly where he said he was going, but she's not afraid to show herself. Like other Sasquatch kind of hide. She's not afraid. There's some lake around there too. That's true.
Okay.
There's some lake. They spotted her around some lake. I thought that was pretty neat. Yeah, I believe they're hybrids. I don't think they're apes. I don't believe in evolution. I'm a born again Christian. I don't believe in evolution, and I think that's one of false teachings. I'll get off my pedestal now, but that's all I got to say about it. But there's some component that makes them like us, but not like us.
Well,
we're not giant.
I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday, we'll say. Back in the day when I was young and in school, and the thought was, and the teaching was that Neanderthal came along, and then he was either wiped out or died out, and then Cro-Magnon man took over, which is essentially a modern human. But the whole teaching during that era was that the two didn't interbreed. One wiped out the other or forced the other one out of existence. Well, now they've done more studies and things like that say that people, modern people, have certain percentages of Neanderthal DNA, and the thought now is that that one didn't exterminate the other. They just melded together. So, and then maybe tomorrow or decades from now, we'll have other information that tells us other things. But the possibility of a Bigfoot human hybrid, well, I mean, I don't want to say likely actually, but it's very possible.
I look at DNA like, I understand that that they can find fingerprint DNA. I mean, they're solving crimes all the time with it.
Yes.
But as far as looking and saying that, oh, there's a gene that's sort of 10,000 years ago, the DNA to me is just building blocks. We share DNA with bananas and a lot of other plants and a lot of other animals.
Absolutely, yeah, much more than we actually think.
To me, DNA is just a building block. It's not
Right.
like something that's a fingerprint. They say, oh, there's an evolutionary tree. No, I don't buy that. I mean, because you hear about human hybrids with Sasquatch, but you never hear about gorilla hybrids. You never see anybody trying to artificially inseminate a chimpanzee or gorilla or whatever.
Not.
You know what I mean? It may be born, but it's born dead.
But
and on the other hand, Sasquatch is a whole different creature.
Right, yeah, and it comes with different possibilities, but. And there have been numerous people that have said, mentioned hybrids and things along those lines. And without any kind of definitive proof, it's difficult to come down and say, well, yeah, this is the way this is. But as I've said,
I read all the books from all the different authors about Sasquatch. I mean, I've got, just about anybody author you can think of. I can't even think of any of them right offhand, but I've got about 25 books and from about 5 or 6 different authors. And, I listen, I read with, and I consider a lot of things they say, but when they get off on evolution, some of them will quote scripture, and then in the next paragraph, they will talk about evolution. Well, I think evolution is partly true. Well, that just blows the whole testimony. You can't believe in both. You can't serve two gods. You know what I mean? You can't, that's just the way it is. You can't think, well, this is partly true and that's partly true. That's just my take on it. Yeah.
Well, my take on most things is that there's a small germ of truth in almost anything, but you really have to do the legwork and the research yourself. It's like, people either canonize or demonize Darwin. Darwin never said we came from monkeys. What Darwin said basically was that it appeared that sometime back in history, humans and other primates might have shared a similar ancestor, which kind of, in a way, that's what gave birth to the whole missing link thing. And a lot of people think that Bigfoot is the missing link between man and primates, but everything I've studied over the years has indicated that it's more like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, is its own creature.
Some good authors for some of your listeners to read.
Yes,
is a Dr. John D. Morris. He passed away last year. I've got 3 or 4 of his books. His father founded the Christian Science Institute up in Dallas.
Okay.
And another guy, Dr. Russell Humphreys, and he's another brilliant scientist. And but they're both Christians. And I listened to Dr. John Morris years ago. I think 91 maybe. The Second Baptist Church in Houston, the Christian Science Institute had a big show going on down there, and he studied the Grand Canyon for years, and then he when Mount St. Helen blew up, he went up there and he goes, Mount St. Helen did in about 12 hours what they said it took Grand Canyon 1,000,000 years, and also he was in a movie, an old movie called Search of Noah's Ark. And it's in one of his books. And that lightning struck him when he got too close. He was in the mountains of Ararat. Lightning struck him, and him and his party decided that's close enough. And Dr. Russell Humphreys has got a bunch of videos on YouTube. And I bought the videos on eBay because I had to have them, so I can watch them anytime I want. But he's also got a book called Starlight and Time, and he changes one little thing in this equation. Like in cosmology. Cosmology is a religion too, because there's no actual proof what happened because they can't duplicate the process in the lab under a controlled environment. So everybody thinks it happened this way.
That's
but
true.
Russell Humphreys,
it's mostly theory.
Right. It's a religion. It's something you believe in from never seeing, you know.
Yes.
And but Russell Humphreys, if you look at his videos, some people look at his videos on YouTube, and I mean he's got like 5 or 6 of them on there. And he will describe how the Earth was when it was created. It was below the timeline because like we live in a 3-dimensional world. All scientists agree that the 4th dimension is time. That's something we control everything in the third dimension, but we can't in the 4th dimension. So the Lord created everything. So he put like in the Old Testament, it said in Genesis, the heavens were created, and Earth was still underneath the timeline, and the angels, or whatever you want to call them, sons of God, were marveled at the when the Earth was being formed, or like that's in the Book of Job. So anyway, the Earth, okay, we got a 7 or 8,000 year old Earth and a billion-year-old universe. How can that happen? And Russell Humphreys describes that in one of his videos. Another good video to watch, it's on Tubi. It's called "Is Genesis Real?"
Okay.
And these guys, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but there's this one narrator. He interviews about 7 or 8 different people, and one of them specifically says every species has a missing link. It's not just human beings. Every species has a missing link. And he goes and he talks to, he showed, and he interviews guys that shows you how when the flood came, how it washed that side of look at the way that the strata is. That's because it's washed like that. And here's another thing. They all call it sedimentary layer. What is sediment? That's something you find at the bottom of the ocean.
Exactly.
How do we get sedimentary layers here on dry land, and especially out west?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because a good friend of mine was following that exact same thing. And we've had a lot of different discussions on it and valuable information. But again, a lot of this stuff, even though it may be backed by science, is actually theory because, as you said, you can't recreate it in the lab. So,
right.
And there's nothing wrong with believing in a very sound theory, nothing at all. So,
all those scientists, that's all called circular reasoning. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
They all refer to each other. Well, so-and-so said this, and so-and-so said this, and so-and-so said this. And they all refer to each other's theories and to push their narrative, when there's really no proof, If like they watched that movie, Is Genesis Real? The guy describes how the different layers are formed. Like if you watch the wave at the beach, the wave splashes up and it pulls it back down, and it's like the tide going in, bringing the sand in and taking the sand out. It's the same process, and that's how you got these different layers. You got they think, well, this layer had this, and then they died off, and then these died. The next layer died off. It happened all at once, But and as far as evolution, if you look in the Old Testament and Genesis, in the first chapter he said animals after their kind, and also those are the same kind of animals that Noah took on the ark. If you look it up, they said after their kind. These certain animals, according to Scripture, were banks of genetic material. You know what I mean? And they had all the different species of animals in their genetic code, so that when they were released, they went all over the place, and all kind of animals came from them.
Well, see, I think a lot of the times what people refer to as evolution, and this is really splitting hairs. It's adaptability. Okay. As far as one thing becoming another, popular theory seems to be that all life came from the ocean and it crawled out on the dry land and eventually turned into humans. But not being able to recreate that, as you said, it's hard to prove. And really, honestly, proof is all about empirical evidence. Okay. I've said this before, that when we have a family of Bigfoot living in the Columbus, Ohio Zoo, then we have empirical evidence because they're right there. We can see them and anyone can see them. But until then, what we actually have is evidence. And that evidence comes in the form, in the case of Sasquatch, things like fur samples and footprints and scat and eyewitness accounts and everything like that. And it becomes important not having empirical evidence, to gather together all of these reports so that we can make an intelligent decision on whether or not we as individuals think that Sasquatch is real.
Have you ever looked in Genesis 6? Do you mind if I talk about that for a second?
No, I don't mind at all.
Genesis 6, I'm not going to get a debate about who the Nephilim are, but I've already been through that with other people.
Mhm.
But these evil offspring that were learned how to do the mixing of animals. Okay, and Genesis 6 is not the only book that says that. The book of Joseph, the writings of Josephus says it, and the book of Jubilees, and I believe the book of Enoch, and there's another one, but I can't think of it. But they all refer to the same thing that was happening before the flood, that they were learning the mixture of animals. And the book of Enoch said that they learned the secret things of heaven. Okay, so now if you go to Ecclesiastes, Solomon, who was probably one of the wisest men that ever lived, if not the wisest,
Yes.
said in Ecclesiastes in the first chapter, can anyone say this is new? No, they can't, because it was before us, an old time that was before us. And then he goes on to say, there is no new thing under the sun. So whatever happened before the flood, they were more advanced before the flood than we are now. Okay, I mean, how many pyramids have we built lately? Have they figured out how to do it yet?
That's an interesting point. There are different schools of thought that believe that we have built up a highly advanced civilization, virtually destroyed ourselves, and started all over again.
Yeah, because that's why the Lord said in chapter 6 that a man's days will only be 120 years, because they were living a long time. And if you think about this, okay, in the first verse it says, "And daughters were born unto men." That's not just that's a statement, because the longer men live, the more apt they are to have daughters than sons. Okay. So that's when it said that, and the Son of God found the daughters of men to be fair, and took the wives over the chose. Now you have Noah that has 3 sons, and he is a grandson of Seth, so he's already got status. You know what I mean? And so you got women everywhere, and you got one guy that's got 3 sons. And I mean that's status right there, not just being the son of one of the grandsons of Seth. So, and like I said, he probably had a lot of help building that ark, and not just it wasn't just him and his 2 boys or 3 boys.
Well, speaking of the Bible, okay, it will make statements, but it doesn't necessarily explain how it was done. And honestly, well, there's a possibility if it did describe how things were done, we wouldn't have the ability to understand it. So,
see, when I read the King James Version,
yes.
I have what's called the Strong's Concordance.
Yes.
Because your Old Testament was written in Old Hebrew or Chaldaic, whatever you want to call it, and that's half of the Strong's Concordance. And the New Testament was written in Greek, which was the trade language between the Romans and the Israelis, because the Romans spoke Latin and the Israelis spoke Aramaic. But Alexander the Great is the one that spread the Greek language from India all the way to Egypt. So I mean that was the trade language. So that's what the New Testament was written in Greek. So if you want to really study your Bible, you have to use not only the Strong's Concordance, but you have to use the rules of exegesis. You have to study. You have to translate according to the text. You can't just say this means this, because you have to say, well, you read a couple, verses down, and you go, oh, well, that can't be that right word then. It's got to be this other word. So I mean, there's rules that you. There's a method of following, understanding what the Bible is saying. Because those guys
by going, I said, I agree with you, because by going at it using the tools that were available when it was created, it gives you a depth of understanding. Even in modern times, the conversation of a person in 2024 would be almost incomprehensible to a person in 1824, and vice versa. Yes, we'd still be speaking English if we were English speakers, but there's so many reference points that have changed since then. So you have to, I guess, immerse yourself into understanding of the culture to really understand the language.
Yeah, they didn't have all the slang back in those days we have today.
Well, no, and they had their own slang that's fallen out of favor.
Yeah.
But so uh, coming back to Sasquatch specifically.
Okay.
Now, you've encountered Sasquatch in at least 2 different states multiple times. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to observe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the only time you've experienced this is when you've been alone, and the other people you've talked to about that have experienced it were alone as well.
Yeah. Brandon was with his cousin hunting, and
Okay.
Mac was standing next to me on that bridge when Sasquatch were running by.
I see.
But as far as the other times, I was by myself. Yeah.
And
And twice and 2 times I had firearms with me, and they still approached me. So I mean, they probably know what firearms are. They're not stupid.
I was going to speak
But
to that because I interviewed a gentleman who's an Inuit, and when he was hunting, he had essentially I forget exactly what the caliber was on it, but the way he described it, it was the largest rifle that independent individual could own. And he's seeing this creature and he's thinking that he didn't have a gun big enough to stop it. So
wow.
that speaks volumes. I mean, I used to know a gentleman who owned a 44 Magnum, I'm sorry. And he was very confident of that gun, but that doesn't have the stopping power of, say, a 30-06. And here's this gentleman that is using one of the biggest high-powered rifles known, and he didn't take a shot because he was sure it wouldn't stop the creature. So that speaks volumes right there.
And I've seen some videos where guys have seen Sasquatch walk out like we have these. Well, out in West Texas they call them senderos. They're like right of ways, and
Yeah.
the guys will, and like in East Texas they call them right of ways. So they have power lines going through, and we got pipelines everywhere in Texas. So, but there was one guy, and this was a video about East Texas. I saw it on Tubi, and he was like standing next to his truck with his rifle on the hood, and Sasquatch walked out and just looked at him, and he looked through and he saw its face through the scope, and he said, "Man, it was a person's face." He said, "I fired anyway." He said he saw the fur fly and it took off. I thought, man, why would you shoot anything if it had a human space?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you would think that that would
This is up
stop
in
you.
East Texas,
Oh, a lot of people have reported a similar circumstance where they actually see the creature full on and can look into its eyes and refuse to shoot because they thought it would be murder because
Right.
it was much human.
Yeah, I wouldn't harm one. I've had, there's a place up in East Texas where there's a park, and they closed the park down in the 50s, part of the park, because they found a man in the tree. Well, there was a man missing, and they went looking for him, and they found him about 30 feet in the tree, all mangled and some partly dismembered. So Kenneth is going to have to tell me what this park is, but so they had a search party. This is back in the 50s now, and they sent a search party out looking for the killer.
Right.
And they had hunters and trackers and all this stuff. Well, the sheriff was on horseback with a couple hunters, and the sheriff's horse came back with blood on the saddle, and the other horses didn't ever come back with the other hunters on it. And so they just said, "Man, we're not going back in there." And they just closed that part of the park down. And there's also a place up here just north of me, probably 100 miles north, is Lake Conroe, and there's a place up there called Stubblefield Lake, small part of Lake Conroe. And the Lone Star Trail also goes in there. It goes from Cleveland all the way up to Lake Conroe. And there's this girl in Oklahoma. I don't know her real name, but she called herself Lead Tracker E. She said, "Billy, don't go in that area." And so I said, "Okay, I won't," because that's pretty close to me, And my wife just wants me to leave them alone. And I've never really went looking for Sasquatch. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or whatever, right place at the right time.
Yes.
Except for that one time, last time I was in Arkansas, I took my slide whistle with me and a baseball bat, and my sister-in-law was sitting next to me smoking a cigarette, and I hit the tree a couple of times. I used my slide whistle. That's the only time I ever tried to get Biggie's attention. So I never really have gone looking for Sasquatch. He just, like I said, I'm at the right place at the right time, or whatever.
Well, you mentioned multiple times feeling that eeriness, that sense of unease, but you never
it's not
said
uneasy. It's terrifying. You know what I mean? It's like, escape, go. I got to get out of here now.
So
It's
it's
terrifying.
more than being unsettling. It's like a primal urge to basically the flight part of fight or flight.
Well, I had an interview a couple weeks ago with Matt from Drunken Cryptids,
Yeah.
and he said, "Have you ever heard of infrasound?" And I go, "What? No." He goes, "Elephants do it. He goes, whales do it, and even tigers do it. That's why people are paralyzed when the tigers roar." And I went, "Oh," and I go, "And what does it do?" He goes, "The same thing it does to you." And I go,
Exactly.
"Really?"
Yes.
So I looked it up, and sure enough, that it's part of the, people get sick and people get terrified and stuff. And I was talking to Wendell from Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel, and he said there are people that go with him, and they get so sick that they got to go back to the truck. They just can't go on.
Well,
Like,
some people
man,
are more sensitive than others, and of course, in the case of a large predator, they roar to paralyze their prey so that they
right?
can bring him down. And but now with in the instance of Sasquatch, in a lot of cases, it seems that that type of ability is used to drive a person off rather than paralyze them with fear so they can be captured.
Yeah, infrasound is like 16 decibels and below.
Yes.
We can't. It's not an audible sound for us. We can't hear
No.
it. Our range isn't there, but our body still reacts to it.
Well, of course
And
it does. It's
and
like
I never heard of that before, and I said I gotta check that out. And then I was watching one of Wendell Burroughs' videos, and he said he started talking about infrasound. I went, there it is. And he said it again.
well, I mean,
So
think of it in terms
maybe I
of
don't know if
this.
that's it or not, but it's what else
Well,
could it be?
it's one aspect, but think of it in terms of this. You are listening to music, and the bass in music, for instance, affects you on a visceral level. I mean, you feel it more than you hear it, even.
Yeah, I was at an Alice Cooper's concert up there at Astroworld, and
Yeah,
that bass drum was out front, and every time he hit that bass drum, it hit me in the chest.
so there you go. And there's
But it
there's a
wasn't the
lot
same
of
thing. You know what I
there's
mean?
a
It
lot of
wasn't the
things
same.
that our bodies pick up long before our standard senses and our conscious brain register it. I mean, how long have you, how many times rather have you been sitting somewhere or out somewhere and you start listening for something that you haven't quite heard yet? It's like something's coming and you're feeling the vibrations hit you before the object causing the vibration comes within sight.
I don't know. I think I know what you mean, but I don't know if that's happened to me or not. You're
Well,
talking about like in a construction site or something?
yeah, anything involving approaching noise, and
Okay.
we talk about animals having such great senses. And they do. They hear better than us. They see better than us. They smell better than we do, and that's why animals will start reacting to a thunderstorm long before we ever hear the thunder.
Or earthquakes and tidal
Or
waves too.
earthquakes and tidal waves rather are excellent examples because they can
Yeah.
feel this. I remember, and this is funny. My daughter watched numerous shows when she was a kid, and on one of these shows, I wish I could remember the name of it because I'd like to give them credit. I thought it was kind of cool that they did this. Uh, they had a write-in letter thing, and one of these viewers had written in and said a lot of times his dog reacts to things that he doesn't see. And he's asking the person there, the adult on the show, asking him, "Do you think my house is haunted?" Well, the guy said, he said something about it's possible, but he said, your dog can't really see a lot better than you, but they can hear much better. A dog, and he tells the viewer that a dog can hear a squirrel from 3 football fields away.
Yeah.
So it's not that necessarily that your house is haunted. It's probably the dog has heard something that you haven't heard.
Right. Yeah, that was when I was reading about that infrasound. I think that may be the reason some people get terrified when they enter a certain place that they think it's haunted. Like you see these shows on TV. Well, I don't watch them, but they go visit all these haunted places. I met a
Right.
guy here one time, and I told him what kind of camera I had. He goes, "You want to go with me?" Because I visit all the haunted houses in Galveston. I said, "No, I'm not going there with you. I'm not doing that kind of thing.
Well,
I'm not bringing that stuff home."
mentioning
Huh?
that, there are so many things that affect us. I know in some of the earlier episodes of Ghost Hunters. They were in there investigating a haunting, and they'd found what they're calling a fear cage. It's where there's a lot of electrical wire that has subpar shielding to it. And it will actually, the electricity, for lack of a better way of putting it, bleeds off. And people that come around
did you call it a Faraday cage?
Well, they were calling it fear cages. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because what happened?
Okay, I'm listening.
Well, what they were saying is that people come into an area that this electricity isn't shielded properly, and random electricity like that will cause numerous things. And the first thing it causes is a heightened state of fear. And so there's so many well, I use the word normal loosely because it's not normal, especially these days, to have unshielded wire in a house. But a lot of these paranormal things can be explained by normal means. It's not to take away from the fact that the paranormal exists, because it definitely does. But it's always best to go at things logically and intelligently and try to find the source rather than decide the source is there.
I don't know nothing about all the supernatural stuff,
Well, I mean,
I don't. With those feelings that I used to get, like at my mother-in-law's, I told my wife, I thought I got to get past this. So I went because I never would go out down to the shop at night. If I go down to the shop and get something out of the freezer, I thought, I'm not going. So I told my wife, I thought I'd get past this. So last June, I took my flashlight down to the shop about 8 o'clock at night. And I sat in the middle of the shop and I turned my flashlight off and I went, all right, here I am. What's next? And nothing happened. I said, okay, I finally tried to conquer this feeling I had,
Yes.
And I still didn't know about infrasound until a couple of weeks ago, So
well, the bringing these two together like this is kind of interesting because it's possible that a lot of sometimes people have experienced that infrasound. There's actually a creature generating that, such as Sasquatch, and they may have misinterpreted it as something, supernatural, we'll say, as in spirits and ghosts and things like that. And the other way around, with that, which really kind of crystallizes what I was saying. We need to gather information as intelligently as possible before we jump to a conclusion and make a decision on what is and isn't. But now, having experienced this multiple times, what are your opinions on all this? How would you describe all this to people?
Well, when my nephew told me that Michael had seen the creature, it was like a confirmation, And like when Mac and I were standing on this bridge with everybody else and Sasquatch ran by, snapping all those limbs, that was kind of confirmation, like the hunt, when I was hunting, like in Broadus, he just followed me out of the woods, but it was all the same feeling, the same feeling I had in the Orange Grove and Davie, that feeling of terror, but it's hearing that, Sasquatch run through breaking all those branches and stuff in 97 and having my nephew tell me, Michael's seen the creature here, and then showing me right there, behind the shop, and that was just like a confirmation for me that's going, okay, I have been feeling this, but before I heard the infrasound, I thought, well, man, am I in the same wavelength with these creatures? Are they, how is it happening? Why do, that's not like Spider-Man or nothing, the spider sense. Why does this happen? Why do I, when they're in the area, why do I get all tense and got to freak out and I got to get out of here, I didn't have an, explanation for that until Matt told me, oh yeah, you must be sensitive to infrasound. I went, okay, yeah, that makes sense,
Well, that's a distinct possibility because some people, we're all different, and some people have better hearing, more sensitive hearing, and some people are just born with very poor hearing. It's not a value judgment, but I had a cousin that was deaf, so that type of thing, I guess, would run in either my family or his mother's family. So it's just different layers. Some people are more sensitive than others.
Yeah, when I first started construction, I can't blame it on the Marine Corps for losing my hearing, even though it may be part of it. But I wasn't out of the Marine Corps long when I had my first encounter with the skunk ape in the orange grove.
Yes.
So, but I worked out here for years before they implemented the earplug program, and I mean, I've been in some noisy furnaces and pump alleys and stuff like that, where it just sounds like it's rattling your brain. So, I mean, it happened before I got in, started working, and it's happened since I've retired. So, I have lost some hearing. I mean, the VA gave me some hearing aids, and I don't like wearing them. But so I don't know. I don't know if it's the hearing loss or because it happened before. And I mean, my hearing's worse now than it was back in those days. And I still get that. It's just something I don't hear, but I feel. My body still reacts to it.
Well, as like I said before, I mean, it's something you pick up on a visceral level. You're not consciously hearing it, but that doesn't
Right,
mean it's not registering.
Right, because some of these, are these other people like they go out hunting for Sasquatch in Arkansas? They don't hear it. It don't bother them at all. But then some people get so sick, and I go back to the car. He said they had one young guy that was with them, and he was all gung ho, ready to go, and then all of a sudden he just freaked out and said, "I'm going back to the truck." He got close enough, and I guess the infrasound or something affected him. That's enough for me. Now there's a place I've been invited to go to this place in they call it Area 2,
Okay.
in Arkansas in December, and this Robert was telling me this today. Right, the one guy I'm going to meet next week in Arkansas was telling me this. He goes, they were in this one Area 2, and it's probably some place like west of Little Rocks in the Ozarks, and he said that they got so close to them that they were throwing rocks at them. They said, "Man, we need to get out of here." The Sasquatch were throwing rocks at them, breaking branches, shaking the bushes, screaming at them, and they finally said, "Man, we got to get out of here." And I told Wendell, I said, "Hey, I got a real good movie camera. If we could because a lot of things don't work with Sasquatch around. I don't know if it's infrasound or what. Batteries go dead, and whatever." I said, if we get some good footage, that'd be something, But I got to get past. I got to get past my own fears. You know what I mean? And the only way I can do it is to jump in the water.
On that subject, I know that you said that you felt terrified, but based on your accounts there, it seems as though if this creature had wanted to do you harm, it could have.
Oh yeah.
So do you think that maybe it was using this infrasound to drive you out of the area so that it didn't have to do anything about you?
Yeah, I don't know if they're curious. I don't know if the infrasound is just a grumbling noise they make. I don't even know. They might just it might just be something that it might be from breathing. Who knows? But Biggie had more than one opportunity to rend me limb from limb, and and I couldn't have done nothing about it. So they would have just said, "Where's Billy?" And who knows if they'd ever found me.
Well, a lot of hikers and campers go missing every year, and that one of the conventional explanations for that, for people who believe in Bigfoot, is that they were taken out by Bigfoot.
Have you ever read that story about Albert Ostman?
It sounds familiar. Won't you refresh my memory?
Back in the 20s, and I'm not sure if it was I'm not sure if it was British Columbia or Washington State. It's in one of my books. It's one of my older books. It was printed back in the 60s.
Okay.
And where this guy was a miner. It might have been up there around Mount St. Helens someplace. And he was digging around for gold or something. And Biggie picked him up in his sleeping bag, Or actually something got into his tent.
Is that the one where it picks him up in his sleeping bag and carries him back to a Bigfoot village kind of thing?
Well, he took him back to this like canyon where he had a spouse and two young ones. And the way he got away from there was giving him a can of snuff, and Biggie got sick and was choking on it, and he ran off, and the female started chattering, but he wound up running away.
I do remember that account. I didn't
Albert
really.
Hochman, it's in one of my books. I can't remember which one it is. I got so many of them, I don't know. But I mean, so there you go. And then you have like that's, for instance, Juan de Ocho, that story I told you about in Old Mexico.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It could happen. And like when Brandon's going up there to to Oklahoma this weekend. There's a hybrid female up there, that is not afraid to come around, won't interact with human beings, but not afraid to be, say, hey, like, here I am, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to get too close,
Right. Well,
And,
perhaps it has more curiosity than the others, or as you were
I
talking
think
about
Sasquatch
earlier,
is real curious. Yeah.
as you
You know
mentioned
what?
earlier, maybe it's along the lines of a coy dog. The fear of humans isn't there. It's just
Have you,
healthy respect for potential danger. Yeah.
have you ever listened to Ron Moorhead's audio recordings of Sasquatch when he was at the deer camp?
I don't believe I have.
Okay.
I'd like to, though.
Yeah, I read that article about his adventure at the deer camp in the Sierras. Way, like early, I don't know what year it was. It was before I had my skunk ape encounter. But
Okay.
a friend of mine told me, yeah, we got skunk apes. The Sasquatch is called a skunk ape down here. As a matter of fact, that was before I even heard the word Sasquatch. But it was Bigfoot back in those days.
Mm.
And but on that one recording, I got both his CDs, man, and I listened to them in my truck. And one of the recordings goes like a, it's kind of gibberish at the end of it.
Yeah.
When I was out in the woods, I had my hog collar, and I can just about mimic that noise that Sasquatch makes. And I was talking about today when I was burning some old trees that fell down. That I said, man, was that did I accidentally mimic that sound with my hog collar? To that sounded like that. So I'm gonna start practicing it. See if you know what I mean. I'm gonna start
Yes.
practicing to see if I can. I don't know what I'm saying or what I'm doing, but I'm gonna try to imitate it.
Well, yes, and I've always wondered when we do that what Bigfoot or Sasquatch is actually hearing. But
Those are good books by Ron Moorhead. I've got all of Ron Moorhead's books.
I'll have to check those out because I'm always looking for a good story, and especially in a first-hand account like that. And you were telling about the last account, and I remember reading an account by Teddy Roosevelt about him and some friends were hunting, and one of the friends saw a creature, Sasquatch, and shot it and fell over into a ravine. Well, they couldn't get down there to get it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that story is what happened to those miners up at Ape Canyon in Mount St. Helen. I don't think Teddy Roosevelt was involved in that. I know that's another story.
No,
this was close to Mount St. Helen.
This took place long before Mount St. Helens.
Right, but I mean, it's up there, not before when it blew up. I'm talking about the mountain range.
Okay.
And there's a place up there by Mount St. Helen called Ape Canyon. And the reason they call it Ape Canyon is because one of those guys shot one of those creatures, and that night those creatures were pounding on the cabin, and they left the next day.
Yeah.
I watched some show not too long ago. They were trying to find that cabin, and they found some. They went up in that general area, and they found some hardware that hadn't rusted. All the wood was gone, but they did find some hardware that was right in that area. Like hinges and door handles or whatever.
Right. And take longer.
Okay, this must be the spot. Now the one with Teddy Roosevelt, I read that in one of my books. Yeah, when he was doing his hunting, he ran into a couple guys, and one of the guys' partners got mauled to death by something. And he and I think that's in Teddy Roosevelt's book, and whatever book he wrote, I don't have it.
But
he wrote that account about how one of the two guys got mauled. They were trappers, I believe, and something stormed the camp one day. One guy said, "Let's go." The other guy said, "No, let's stay." Well, one of them got killed, and so the other guy said, "I'm not sticking around."
Right, and there's a lot of different accounts like that, and people who spend a fair amount of time in the wild places and back in the woods and everything else always report eventually some form of strange happenings, whether it's a strange sound or something along those lines. I know an individual who on his property, if he says if you go back to a certain spot up on the hill away from everyone, that you'll hear people calling your name. So these things are possible, and it's much more, I think, much more credible than people would have a tendency to think just on the face of it. It's just like you're talking about hearing these sounds and stuff. Well, I mean, you're an experienced hunter. It's not like you just decided to go out into the woods last Thursday and go squirrel hunting. No, you'd been outdoors for quite some time. So if you hear a noise that makes you uneasy, it's because you know that noise doesn't belong there, or
You don't
because
recognize it.
yeah, or it's because it's something that is dangerous has come into the area.
I really haven't spent that much time in the woods. I've hunted, 10 or 15 times, maybe more. But, I came out here to work, and make a living,
Yeah.
and that's what I spend most of my time doing. My little girls are growing up. They're going, "Where's Daddy? Daddy's at work." And I work weekends, and so I pulled leads, for the welders and whatever. But so the few times that I do go in the woods, I never expect anything to happen. And that was only 3 times out here. Out of maybe 20 times that I went hunting, that something happened like that.
Right.
But I forget about all the other times I go hunting, but I remember those 3 times. I remember those 2 times in Florida too.
Right.
When you have something like that happen to you, you just don't forget it. It's not something you just
Well, it marks you.
it happens.
It changes you, especially if it's the first time you've experienced something that's beyond your normal experience. That registers and it resonates with you because, in a very real way, it's changed you.
Yeah. I never realized at this point in my life that I'd be talking to people about what happened to me. That these different things that happened. I told my friend. I talked to one of my friends from Florida today. And he said, "Billy," he said, "if it was anybody else, I think they were crazy." He said, "But I've known you so long, I know you're not crazy." I said, "Yeah, it's." And I told my mom for the first time a couple of weeks ago. I said, let me tell you something, Mom. What been happening to me for the past 49 years?" And I told her, and I said, "Are you still there? You still there?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm still here." And I go, "What do you?" She's in South Carolina. She goes, "What do you think?" She goes, "Well, that's unbelievable." I said, "Yeah, I know, it's unbelievable. I got to call my friends every now and then for a reality check. Yeah, Billy, that really happened. I heard you say that on radio. Yeah, I was with you when he went running by, So, sometimes it's unbelievable to me too,
Well, things like this. Okay, well, put it in this perspective. If the only people you ever speak to are people that believe in Sasquatch, then that conversation is completely normal. An occurrence is completely normal.
Yeah.
But if like say for instance, a man of 50 saw a Sasquatch when he was 10, then not every one of his contemporaries saw a Sasquatch and necessarily believed in it. And so it's odd. It makes you stand out, and that's why in a lot of cases people won't share their stories about strange occurrences and the paranormal, simply because they don't think anyone will either understand, or because they think people will make fun of them and imply that they're somehow deficient.
Yeah, I correspond with this guy that's up in Colorado, and he posted what happened to him on Facebook.
Yes.
And I contacted him. Then he pulled his post down, but I still found out. So he contacted me yesterday, I think it was.
Okay.
And about because I had put my other 2 interviews on a couple different sites on Facebook. Yeah, this guy up in Colorado, he was out camping, and this young Sasquatch actually walked up to his campsite, and he gave him some pizza, and some other stuff.
Yeah.
And the young Sasquatch, and wasn't much bigger than what he was, went away and came back the next night looking for some more scraps, And so he posted it, and then he pulled it down, and he goes, "Man, I'm tired of people making fun of me." I said, "Man, look," I said, "it's going to happen." I said, "That's why I join these different things, so I could talk to like-minded people," because I tell my grandsons, and they go, "There's no Bigfoot, Papa," So, but I did send both my 2 of my interviews to one of my grandsons, and he he told me to take a shotgun in the woods so Bigfoot don't eat me.
Well, it is so easy to belittle something you don't understand or don't believe in, and it runs the gamut. It's not even necessarily the paranormal or the strange. In normal existence, we'll say, if you like football, we'll say one group likes football and another group doesn't. Both of these groups thinks the other one's wrong. So, and people will get on, unfortunately, on all these sites, because I've seen it. These sites that are for people sharing experiences with, we'll say, Sasquatch. And there's people that we get on there simply to make fun of people who are sharing a story. Now,
Right. Yeah.
my philosophy is, well, if I don't believe in it, if I don't like it, I don't fool with it. So if I would never, for instance, just log into a group discussing anything just to make fun of them for what they were discussing.
Yeah, I posted something, or I didn't post anything. I commented on somebody's post one time, and the guy goes, and I told him what happened to me, and he goes, "Where's the evidence?" And he kept going about the evidence. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? I mean, he can say that to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He's just one of those trolls that are on some of their Facebook pages, that want to, and then later on down there, your wife said, "We want to talk to you." You know what I mean? Was on that same post. You know what I mean? And I said, okay, well, they don't want to talk to him. They want to talk to me.
Well, I can, there's hundreds of people that are just picking a fight for no reason.
Yes.
Those type of people are a dime a dozen. Anybody can type in, "You're crazy." Keyboard warriors do it all the time. What I'm more interested in is the story and the experience. And then we'll just let the listeners decide whether or not that it's credible. So, and I think that's the main goal here. And if everybody can talk together, share stories and information, then eventually maybe we'll figure out what this is that we're seeing.
Yeah. I don't think, I don't know when it's going to happen. I know things are getting pretty crazy out there in the world right now,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like everybody's chasing their tail. Nothing's really getting done anymore.
Well, it's because, okay, look at it this way. We'll say, for instance, I drive a Ford truck and you drive a Chevy truck and somebody else we know drives a Dodge truck. We all might think that our truck's the best, but as long as we're all going to the same place, what does it matter?
Yeah. And I drive a Toyota truck.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a Toyota truck.
Yeah. I got an old truck. I got a 95 T100 Toyota truck that I'm restoring. Yeah. I got an older truck.
I've got
my girls gave up trying to tell me to buy a new truck. I said, I don't want a new truck.
Well, it's whatever you're interested in. I would rather have an old truck than the payments on a new truck.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
But so is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in Arkansas. I know it's my mother-in-law's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And this one guy, Robert, we're going to get together. We're going to go to this park that's on Crowley Ridge. And also there's a cave down in Newcastle. My father-in-law was born in Newcastle. I don't even think it's an incorporated area in Arkansas. But I found it, and I was asking Wendell, I said, "Are there any caves on Crowley Ridge?" And he goes, "I don't know." So I found a website that had an outlaw caves just north of the St. Francis River.
Yes.
On Crowley Ridge. And I said, okay, I'm going to go ask some questions, And I used to go, when I used to visit Arkansas, I used to go visit, Walmart used to have a little cafe, and I would go walk in there about 7:30 in the morning, and I'd walk in there to be about 15, 20 of those old farmers in there, and I used to go and listen to them, and two of my wife's uncles were in there, and I'd walk up and I'd go, "Hey, which one of you fellas is going to buy me a cup of coffee?" And most of them would look at me like, "Who the heck are you?" So my uncles would go, "Get over here, boy, that's my boy," and I would talk to them about things that used to happen in Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
or in Wynne, Arkansas. But they're all gone now, and the new Walmart doesn't have a cafe, so I can't go talk to the old fellers anymore. And so I got to find another way to dig, you know what I mean, to get some information from around there. I don't know how I'll do it. Maybe go to the public library or something like that,
Those are the best sources of accurate information. Honestly, they are, because it's like there's several people around where I live that they could tell you the entire history of the region going back 100 years. Mm-hmm. So, and they have direct knowledge with it because either they've experienced it or their family members have experienced it, things like that. So, and the same holds true with the strange and the paranormal, because a lot of times these things happen. They don't get any buzz, not on a national level or even a state level, but it just kind of quietly happens to the community that experiences it. And the internet has spread things out, but for decades, something would happen. It was just a regional thing, and nobody else would know anything about it.
You know, I was talking to this guy, Robert, today that I met on through the Arkansas Bigfoot cartel. He
Yes.
called me, and he's we started talking about Crowley Ridge. He knows all those areas right around there, which was good. So, and he told me that there's this place called Fitzgerald Crossing, and it's
Yes.
just kind of a changing subject. And it's just south of Wynn, go like you're headed towards Forest City.
Mhm.
And he goes, they were, I think it was some years ago. He drives a truck for Love's now, but now I think he was driving truck for the farmers hauling grain. And he
Mhm.
said, he said it was nighttime. I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw this orange lights. I got out of my truck and there was this big orange disc that was hovering over the farmland. You know what I mean? Over the fields.
Yes.
And he said, part of it was spinning, part of it wasn't. I said, no kidding. I said, right there at Fitzgerald Crossing? He goes, yeah. I said, man, I know exactly what you're talking about. So, I mean, even that kind of stuff is going on out there. You know?
Absolutely. There's a gas plant down the road from me, and people for decades have periodically reported lights over top of this gas plant. And it's interesting, and it can't be explained. It's not planes or anything like that, because there's no serious air traffic around this area.
Yeah, I've never seen any UFOs or anything like that, but I got a pretty good idea what they are. You know,
Now,
according to scripture, you know, that's how I look at it. You know,
I think that you said something about going on this hunt. I wouldn't even. I'd be interested if 2 or 3 of you wanted to call in at the same time and share your experiences together. I think that would be interesting. That way you get 2 or 3 viewpoints.
Okay, this is going to be taking place sometime in December.
Okay.
You know, and I haven't even got my truck back out of the shop yet. So, but I'll probably make it because I don't want to miss an opportunity like that. You know.
Well, no,
hopefully something would happen. You know, hopefully something terrifying will happen. You know. Yeah, I mean, I'll be glad to tell you what happened. You know, probably won't take an hour and a half if it scared me that bad. You know what I mean?
but yeah, maybe we just call it an update. You know, have you on the show again?
Yeah, okay, that'd be fine
in the future. Yeah. But for the moment, though, if you don't have anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners, then I'll simply say thanks a lot for taking your time to share your experiences with us and your insights. And we hope to talk again to you soon.
Okay, Charlie. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And keep me updated on that. You've got my information. So, yeah, keep me updated on what's going on.
I will.
This is Charles Romans, and on behalf of myself and our guests, thank you for joining us on this walk through the shadows of legend. If you like what you heard, please follow us and visit our website at shadowsoflegend.com and support our Patreon page to help keep the content flowing. And if you would like to be a guest and share your own brush with a stranger paranormal, don't hesitate to email us and include a contact number. The strange and surreal, the normal and the paranormal are all aspects of the world in which we live. As you reflect upon the stories we have shared, keep in mind that the people sharing these stories are actual, real people just like us. Were the stories shared compelling enough to be given credibility, or should they be relegated to the deeper part of the shadows? But when determining this, it might be a good idea to keep an open mind, because when we look around, we might discover that our own world is less brightly lit than we once thought. Until next time, I'll be waiting for you in the shadows of legend.